Can I share this table? Aisha asked, her voice gentle but firm enough to rise above the clatter of the crowded cafe. Balance was an art she'd mastered, one hand supporting a plastic tray stacked with a kid's meal, the other guiding her sleepy 6-year-old, Ibrahim, who leaned against her hip like a drooping sunflower. Every seat was taken. Students hunched over laptops, office workers chattered on lunch breaks, couples occupied booths with shopping bags sprawled everywhere. It was the kind of chaotic afternoon that made a single mother feel twice as visible, and twice as invisible. Across the booth sat a man whose presence seemed to part the noise around him. His charcoal suit looked like it had been stitched directly onto him, precise and expensive. Polished cufflinks caught the light every time he moved his hand to flip a page. His face was half hidden behind sleek sunglasses, even indoors, an odd choice unless you were the sort of man accustomed to shielding yourself from the world. He looked up, slowly. Their eyes met. "Only if I pay the bill," he said, the words smooth, unhurried, as if he were offering her something inevitable rather than optional. Aisha blinked, thrown off balance more by his tone than his answer. "I didn't ask for you to pay." "I know," he replied, closing his folder with a soft snap. "But I insist." She hesitated. Pride and practicality battled inside her chest. She hated accepting help, especially from strangers, especially men in suits who probably assumed she needed saving. But Ibrahim tugged her sleeve again, whispering, "Mama, my legs hurt." That decided it. "All right," she said, sliding into the booth. "But I'm not asking for charity." He gave the smallest hint of a smile that looked rare, expensive, and almost reluctant. "Good, because I'm not offering charity." For a few minutes, they ate in a silence that felt strangely comfortable. The stranger returned to reviewing his papers while Aisha helped Ibrahim unwrap his burger. She tried not to stare, but something about the man demanded attention, his stillness, his quiet confidence, the way he seemed to live in a slower, steadier rhythm than the rest of the world. Then Ibrahim's elbow knocked over his juice. Orange liquid spread like a tidal wave across the billionaire's pristine documents. "Oh, I'm so sorry," Aisha gasped, lunging for napkins, panic rushing up her throat. But the man simply lifted the papers, shaking off the droplets. "It's all right," he said calmly. "It's only paper." And for the first time, Aisha wondered who this man really was. Aisha dabbed at the spilled juice, cheeks burning with embarrassment, but the man remained impossibly calm. He wiped one corner of the document with a napkin, then set the entire folder aside, as if his multi-million-dollar plans could wait. Ibrahim, sensing he'd caused trouble, shrank in his seat. "Sorry, uncle," he whispered. The man turned toward him, removing his sunglasses for the first time. Aisha froze. His eyes were sharp, obsidian dark but strangely kind, the kind of eyes that studied the world the way a chess master studies a board. "No harm done," he told Ibrahim. "Accidents happen." Aisha exhaled slowly, surprised at how gentle his voice sounded when directed at her son. Most men grew impatient around children. This one softened, if only slightly. "I'm really sorry," she said again. He shook his head. "Trust me, these papers are replaceable." A faint smirk touched his lips. "People aren't." Aisha wasn't sure how to respond to that, so she focused on cleaning the table. But he watched her, leaning back, elbows resting loosely on the booth's seat. His gaze wasn't judgmental, more curious, as if trying to piece her together like a puzzle he wasn't used to solving. "You're very prepared," he noted, nodding toward the small emergency pack she carried. Wet wipes, napkins, a spare shirt for Ibrahim, even a tiny bandage kit. "I'm a single mom," she replied with a tired laugh. "If I'm not prepared, the world falls apart." He seemed to consider this. "Single parenting. That's difficult." "It's life," she replied, shrugging. "We manage." He tapped a finger against the table, studying her again. "You work a lot." "Too much," she admitted. "2 jobs. Sometimes 3, if you count tutoring. Bills don't pay themselves." A small silence followed, not an awkward one. More like he was processing her words the way he processed stock charts and business risks. "What about you?" she asked, trying to be polite. "What do you do?" Before he could answer, the waiter approached with fresh napkins and a refill for Ibrahim, smiling nervously at the well-dressed man. "Mr. Zaidan, would you like anything else?" Aisha's breath hitched. She knew that name. Everyone did. The billionaire. The investor. The man whose decisions caused markets to rise or fall. She slowly looked back at him. He met her gaze without flinching. That's Zaydan, she whispered. He lifted one brow. Is that a problem? Her heart hammered. No, just unexpected. He leaned forward slightly, voice softer now. Why? Did you think billionaires don't sit with tired single mothers in crowded cafes? Aisha swallowed. Honestly, yes. Zaydan's lips curved. Then perhaps you haven't met the right billionaire. Aisha wasn't sure whether she wanted to laugh or hide under the table. Having lunch beside a billionaire was intimidating enough, but one who looked at her as if she were interesting, not inconvenient, that was something else entirely. Zaydan rested his hands on the table, fingertips lightly together. He wasn't smiling. Not exactly, but there was a softness in his eyes that hadn't been there before. So, he said, you know who I am. Everyone knows who you are, Aisha murmured. TV, interviews, charity galas. You're everywhere. I don't attend galas, he corrected. I donate instead. Quieter. She blinked. That's surprising. Most valuable things are quiet, he replied, gaze lingering on her a second too long. Aisha looked away, suddenly self-conscious of her simple clothes, her worn handbag, Ibrahim's scribbles on her sleeve. She had spent years training herself not to compare her life to others, especially the rich. Relax, he said, noticing her discomfort. I don't bite. You look like you might, she said before she could stop herself. To her shock, he laughed, a low, unexpectedly warm sound. Even Ibrahim glanced up from his burger, surprised. You're honest, Zaydan said. Refreshing. She shrugged, cheeks warm. I don't have the energy to pretend. You shouldn't, he said. People pretend too much around me. Of course they did. Billionaires didn't meet real people, they met performances. But Aisha didn't have the luxury of performing. Still, the question weighed on her. Why was he being so open? Friendly, attentive. Maybe he sensed her confusion, because he suddenly shifted the conversation. Tell me about your son, he said. Aisha blinked. Why? You seem proud of him, he said simply. I'm curious. She glanced at Ibrahim, who was now building a tower out of French fries. He's my whole world, she said softly. Smart, sensitive, loves stories and planes, wants to be a pilot one day. A pilot, Zaydan repeated thoughtfully. Ambitious. Dreams are free, Aisha said with a faint smile. It's the schooling that's expensive. Something flickered across Zaydan's face. Sympathy, maybe, or recognition. Then he turned slightly toward Ibrahim. Do you know how planes stay in the air? He asked. Ibrahim's eyes lit up. Lift. Zaydan nodded, impressed. Correct. And do you know what lift needs? The little boy shook his head. A strong foundation, Zaydan said. Just like people. Aisha felt something in her chest tighten, unexpectedly. Then, unexpectedly, the billionaire looked at her again. You're doing well, he said quietly. Better than you think. She swallowed hard. Praise was rare in her world. Hearing it from him felt strange, and strangely meaningful. Thank you, she said softly. Zaydan's gaze lingered on her a moment longer. So, he said, leaning back. Should we continue this conversation over dessert? Aisha wasn't sure whether she'd heard him correctly. Dessert, she repeated, blinking at Zaydan as if he had suggested they go skydiving instead of ordering cake. Zaydan nodded once, casually, as if billionaires offering dessert to strangers, single mothers with messy hair and tired eyes, was an ordinary weekday occurrence. She began, searching for words. I don't really do dessert. He raised a brow. You don't eat dessert. She huffed a tiny laugh. I don't buy dessert. There it was, the truth, exposed like an open wound. Not by intention, but because honesty was the only language her fatigue allowed. For a moment, Zaydan's expression didn't change. Then, slowly, he reached for the menu, flipped it open, and slid it toward her. Today, he said, you do. Aisha stared at the laminated page as if it were written in another language. Cakes, pastries, milkshakes. The cheapest item cost more than she usually spent on dinner. She swallowed. Zaydan, relax, he murmured. It's just dessert, not a marriage proposal. Her cheeks warmed instantly. I didn't think. You're overthinking, he interrupted gently. I invited you because I want to continue talking. She hesitated, but Ibrahim solved the dilemma for her. Mama, he whispered, tugging on her sleeve, can I have ice cream? She exhaled, defeated by the earnest hope in her son's eyes. Fine, one dessert. Zaydan signaled the waiter with a subtle lift of his hand, an effortless gesture of power. Within seconds, the young man rushed over, smiling nervously again. Yes, Mr. Zaydan, the boy will have ice cream, he said. She'll have. His eyes flicked to Aisha, lingering with a question. What do you like? Aisha hadn't been asked that in years. Chocolate cake, she said finally, almost shyly. And for me, Zaydan added, black coffee. The waiter scurried off. Aisha fidgeted with the napkin. You know, people might misunderstand this. Zaydan leaned in slightly, voice low and calm. Which people? Everyone, she whispered. Look at us. He looked around the bustling cafe. The students, the couples, the families, then back at her. No one here matters, he said. I'm choosing to sit with you. That's enough. Her breath hitched. Then he added, softer, unless it makes you uncomfortable. She looked at him, the billionaire who treated her with more sincerity than most men earning minimum wage, and shook her head. It doesn't, she admitted. A rare, genuine smile touched his lips. Good, he said, because I'm not finished learning about you. And for the first time in years, Aisha felt seen.